Thanks so much. Welcome everyone, and thanks again for joining us today. As indicated, my name is Angie Clark, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Perficient. On behalf of our entire team, I'd like to thank you all for once again joining today's webinar. Before we move on to a brief overview of Perficient and the heart of our presentation on building a modern workplace hub with teams, I wanted to review a few basic housekeeping items. First, all participants on this call are in listen-only mode, which means everyone is on mute. You can submit questions to the speakers anytime today, though, by typing them in the chat window, which is located on the left side of your screen. Please make sure you state your questions clearly, and keep in mind other webinar participants cannot see your questions and vice versa. As such, your questions to the speakers will be anonymously addressed as time allows towards the end of the presentation. But if you still have any unanswered questions after the webinar or would like to request information about our services, please feel free to reach out to our speakers directly. You can also fill out the Contact Us forms located on our Perficient.com website. As indicated earlier, please note that today's webinar is being recorded and that will be sent to you within the next few business days. A link to the slides will also be included. Now that we've covered those few webinar-related items, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. Ron Jones is our Director of Modern Productivity here at Perficient, and Joel Olson is a Microsoft MVP and our Perficient Regional Director. Ron, I'd like to turn it over to you for a brief overview of Perficient and our Microsoft and modern productivity practices.
Sounds great. Thanks, Angie. And greetings, everyone. Let's talk a little bit about Perficient, then we can get to the news of the day. So Perficient, of course, is composed of over 26 offices across the U.S. and abroad, which allows us to reach all of our customers across the country. As far as our profile, as a company, we talk about the locations. Revenue-wise, we cover around about $500 million. We are traded on the NASDAQ, and one of our largest things that we really like to go to, that we'll see on all these slides practically, is our 95% repeat business rate, which helps us to kind of exemplify and capture not only our breadth and depth in these technology areas, but also the quality of our work. From a Microsoft perspective, we've taken over 5 million users to the cloud, and this is across all verticals, and we have dedicated teams for healthcare, life sciences, finance, retail, automotive, and other verticals. We also have dedicated OCM practices, Azure, and a digital agency to help with some of the efforts that we're talking about today. Our modern productivity practice, which I head up, really is all about delivering employee experiences for the digital workplace, utilizing Office 365 and the tool sets therein to optimize communication, collaboration, and productivity. And that will be the basis for our conversation today. We're also a member of many Microsoft programs as a dedicated Microsoft partner and a national service provider, and those being the BizApps program, Content Services, Portals, and a few others. We also enjoy a breadth and depth, and of course we bring a lot to the table, which really helps us to deliver to our clients, whether it's strategy all the way to support and managed services. Well, you guys are here to talk about Microsoft Teams, which is really awesome. So let's get to that. Our agenda today will go through the following areas. First, we'll start talking about improving teamwork with Microsoft Teams. Then we'll get into the overall vision and what you can expect and what you should put your thoughts towards as far as the Teams platform goes. We'll do a brief turnaround for adoption and change management, a topic that we covered on our last webinar, and then we'll get into some of the juicier details around teamwork tools and applications, templates and business processes, Teams and extensibility, and at the very end we'll kind of recap with some resources, questions, and talk about some of our upcoming events. But for now, let's go into improving teamwork. I know, Joel, this is a very large topic for you, so you want to get us started as far as the teamwork stuff goes?
Joy,
I think one of the reasons, yeah, thanks everybody, sorry for that. I think the best way to kind of approach this is to first talk about where we're at and some of the challenges we have. And essentially we're getting bombarded with tasks and requests and updates and alerts and announcements and activities and all the various projects we're working on. And it doesn't matter where you work inside of an organization. People these days are just bombarded with requests. And often in this day and age, in the digital world, they all come in via email. And they may hit us up in different ways as well, but it seems like the inbox is just where we get overloaded. And the situation is we're then trying to respond to these emails and trying to get our regular work done, as well as address these different tasks and try and managing all this. And it's chaos. You know, we get hundreds of emails of various types, and they're not prioritized when they come in, and they're not coming in a very cohesive way. And so ultimately what we end up doing is we end up jumping between interface to interface. We're looking at charts and graphs. We're going from meeting to meeting. In fact, I've definitely had those days where there is no break. It's just back-to-back meetings all day long. In fact, I think I've had entire jobs that are just that. But what's great about this concept of the digital workplace and really where Teams fits in is it helps us to organize the information that's coming in into these channels. And the idea is these various work streams, and it may be projects, it may be customers that we're working on, but essentially being able to actually group the activities in the feeds that may be coming in from blogs or social media, or even alerts and updates from our systems if we're in operations. So the idea here is that these work streams can actually be focused into channels. So when we're working, we can actually work on a specific project, and then even on the back end of that request or those change requests that are coming in, we're then able to more easily switch between those apps and interfaces because they're actually built right into the tool. And I think that this is common. What people miss about what the great thing about Teams is this idea it actually helps us focus our work streams and actually as well allows us to reduce the context switching and the various different applications we're using and actually find a new place to live. It's a new place for us to be able to organize communication, collaboration, content, tasks, files, applications, all of it in a single place. And that's a huge vision, and we'll talk more about the vision, but I think understanding kind of where we've been and where the potential is for us to go with Teams and with this new concept of digital work, it can really help us out a lot. And I think as well, when you start talking about what is the problem space, what is it we're trying to solve here, time is something that is a limited commodity. You know, it's the most valuable commodity that an organization has. And when you talk about 61% of an employee's time is spent on routine tasks, and that 20% of our work could actually be automated, our ability to reduce the context switching which is the problem, we can actually regain productivity and reduce the context switching that actually has to happen, because the switching causes a lot of chaos. It causes a lot of problems where it takes us a lot of time to then refocus. And focus is such a huge, huge deal.
That's right, Joel. And it comes down to yeah, no problem, because really that's a huge problem space in the enterprise, especially with, you know, the dream of the digital workplace is to have everything connected and to bring news in a timely fashion and whatnot. And what's starting to happen is that now we're being bombarded by those things like you said. But let's talk about how Teams can actually help out with some of this stuff. Some of the studies that we've done so far with Forrester and others have really started to denote some of the savings in Teams, not just some of your IDC level productivity stuff, but even more so around, you know, looking at things like 80% of leaders reporting that accessibility features in Teams made their organization more productive. That's huge, as well as the second one you'll see here, which is how 83% of leaders are also reporting that teams has helped their organization improve the customer experience. And those things end up resulting in, one, better customers, and of course more revenue coming into the organization. And those things are really what drive the business and also help businesses outcompete their competitors. And of course, it saves time. And this may become a little bit more abstract, but what it comes down to is that from an employee perspective, we're looking to save about 1 hour or between 1 and 8 hours per week. And it varies by role, but you can also see that a lot of this stuff just goes back to your working styles, which we'll get to in a little bit. But information workers can save up to 4 hours per week from an improved collaboration and information sharing ecosystem, while first-line workers can easily save 45 minutes per week by collaborating with either colleagues or customers in a way that allows them to either express best practices, seek quick answers, and overall improve customer service, which really helps. Employees, of course, can save 24 hours per day, minutes per day, That would be a lot if we did that. But 24 minutes per day working outside of organizations, if you can save that time from a collaboration perspective, working with partners and other parties, that also just builds to that story of working efficiently, which is really what we're here to talk about. And of course, we want to reduce time in meetings because we're all bombarded with meetings. We even have some, very good clients that have cultures of meetings, and we want to get to the point where we can actually move the ball ahead instead of meeting, the meeting, so to speak.
Yeah, this is a great study. I actually really enjoyed reading that. I think those of you who are trying to either justify the deployment of teams or you're in the middle of it and trying to figure out what are the key metrics, these are really good examples of things that if you can understand your organizational analytics, establish baselines, you can actually help establish as well understanding what is this doing in your organization with either your first-line workers or your employees, and being able to even get anecdotal feedback from employees, because essentially being able to understand those successes, it can help in your deployment the more you can actually understand these stories and to actually build the business case as you talk to executives. And if there's any executives that are on, these are some key metrics for you and can actually help in your deployment. So this next section is around the vision, and the vision for teams. And what I found is it's really important to understand and get your head around the vision for what a digital workplace can do for your organization. And often, once you actually have that vision, a lot of it is just like this quote says. Leadership is about pointing in the direction, articulating a vision of the world that does not yet exist, then asking help from others to ensure that vision happens. And what's beautiful about this is, a lot of it's like, oh, well, I'm not getting support from this org or that org, or there's these internal conflicts. A lot of this is making sure that vision is seen, articulating it, and I think that visuals are actually really good at being able to articulate the vision, and actually even that study is a really good thing. I'd actually encourage you to kind of put together a kit to be able to educate executives so that you've actually got the entire organization on your side as you're deploying teams. And what is this vision? So I've got a few different slides to kind of illustrate this vision, but this one actually comes from Microsoft and how they're actually looking at it. And there's three kind of big things here. The first one is this idea of a single hub. And we talked about context switching and decision making, really key things, this idea of a single hub. Now I want to stop here for a second and help you understand the magnitude. When we talk about a single hub, it really is that. Like, the vision of this thing is that it can really be a place where you get work done, not just a place where you go and visit and click and go off somewhere else. It's actually a tool where you can do work. And the idea is you're actually building solutions, you're embedding existing line of business integration, which is where these other things come in. The automating workflows, routine tasks. Basically, this is the place for automation. You know, in this Office 365 ecosystem, we talk a lot about the Power Platform. Well, the Power Platform, like Power Apps, Power BI, Power Automate, Power Virtual Assistant, these tools, this is actually the place where you can actually build those solutions and do those integrations. And yes, you can use those with SharePoint as well, but you'll notice that all of Office 365 integrates very, very well with Teams being that single hub. And then the last thing here is really about driving digital transformation and this idea of pulling in your critical line of business solutions. You know, building all those places where people are actually going from interface to interface, you know, going from this Oracle app to this Trello project app, and all these various SaaS applications where data is stored. Your ability to actually bring those solutions into one is really the vision for this platform. And the idea is your conversations and everything live in the same place. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, should I be thinking about Teams like I thought about Skype? And the answer is actually no. So the vision for Skype really was kind of a unified communications vision of, it was UC, calling, chats, and meetings. And I don't want to, you know, underplay what Skype is, but I definitely want you to understand what Teams is. And a lot of it is really that mentality and kind of story of the iceberg, where when you look at an iceberg, you know, that's in the water, say you're on a boat, you're looking at that iceberg, you're really only seeing what's above the water. But ultimately, there's a lot that's actually under that iceberg. And you may have heard of this kind of illustration in the past, but the idea here is Teams brings a lot to this idea of unified communication. It's much more than unified communication. It's unified communication plus collaboration, plus applications, plus bots, plus connectors, plus search. It brings together your storage and SaaS applications, and it's this really rich set of functionality and brings it all together into one. And the more that you kind of understand that just understanding that there's a lot more here than kind of where things were with Skype or with Link and so on. It's more than just a chat app for sure. Now we're going to start our first poll, and the question is, which statement best describes the organization regarding Microsoft Teams? And the responses are: Teams is our standard, currently using Teams and Skype, or preparing to migrate to Teams, or no current plans to deploy or launch Teams. And I'll give it a little bit of time. Okay, I'm looking at the responses coming in. Looks like we've got somewhere around some percent. Okay, and we'll go ahead and post those results. All right, so it looks like most of the people on the call are currently using Teams and Skype, and then we've actually got equal. All right, there we got another one in there. So there are people who are already on Teams, which is somewhere around 20% or so, with some who are preparing to migrate to Teams, and it looks like there's even some people on the call that are actually looking to kind of investigating, and I'm hoping that we can convince you by the end of this call. Now, one of the kind of powerful things here is if you step back and you talk about this tool, this unifying tool that can provide this single interface to get work done, this single hub, when you start talking about that from a perspective of what can an organization do with this tool? And a lot of organizations are in this in progress of a number of different digital transformation projects across the organization. And especially from, say, a CIO or CEO, CTO perspective, they look and approach business and they say, there's a lot that's going on with technology as far as cloud technologies and IoT and AI and chatbots and so on. There's a lot of innovation happening in the technology space. But one of the things that's super, super powerful is Teams allows itself to really be the center of all that's happening here. You can actually use Teams to integrate your AI solutions. You can use it for those IoT dashboards and alerting and pull together teams. You can use it for your HR, your service desk, or any kind of chatbot solutions you're looking for your organization. And it's a fantastic interface for being able to have that because you've got that chat type of experience built right into it. And it's really designed around that. And both with the Power Virtual Assistant or even being able to build solutions in Azure. And it doesn't even stop there. You can even build your solution elsewhere and integrate it. And I think that's the really powerful thing with Teams is just the fact that it really is an application platform itself in being able to bring in all of the productivity apps across Office 365 and even the SaaS apps that are out there. And we really are talking about hundreds of applications that Microsoft and these various SaaS solutions have already built integration for Microsoft Teams. And even things like your intranet and your news, maybe you've already built it on SharePoint. The fantastic thing here is that SharePoint News, it's native integration. It pulls it right in. Being able to bring in SharePoint pages or web parts. When you build solutions, you're using SharePoint Framework. SharePoint Framework is also native with Teams and being able to build solutions even in Teams. And as you look to the future with things like Project Cortex and other content services, even your G Suite or your Box and Dropbox, there's already built-in native functionality to integrate with those applications. So it's super, super powerful in terms of building and bringing those solutions in. And when you start talking about other lines of business or your systems of record and systems of engagement, your ability to bring those things in is you've already got the 80% solution here to be able to kind of bring those solutions in. It's quite powerful when you start talking about what's the potential for how Teams could be used in an organization. Now, I do think that it's important to understand that there's so many people who, especially as it relates to SaaS applications, IT often takes a back seat, and they simply flip on the lights and say, all right, now you've got Teams, go ahead. Well, there's actually what I consider 7 key elements to a successful strategy. And so when you even talk about your vision, that vision and roadmap are really key, but there's other aspects to this. You really, really need to have an exec sponsor who's on board and understands and is driving that vision. You need to have a governance plan. We're talking roles, responsibilities, who can do what, when, talking about your life cycle, the provisioning, who can create a team, and so on. What should our naming standards be? What type of content can be shared? All those controls are actually built right into the platform, but they're not on by default. By default, anybody can create a team, as an example. If you flip it on, all of a sudden everybody's creating a team and you've got chaos. So getting your arms around that. Now, going back even to your vision, well, what are you measuring? What are those business outcomes that you're planning? That's really key stuff. And then we talk about the success around adoption change management. We'll be diving more into this, but your champion program, your adoption program, your communication and training, and so on. And how can people interact with you? What is your training plan? Do you have office hours? Your ability to actually help people to share that vision and understand it means a little bit of interface time, a little bit of time to engage. And then, we talked about this vision being so big and how much of it is actually on the back end in terms of it as an application platform strategy, the vision is really, really important. So you can actually build out your personas for your teams and actually helping them build solutions. And there's so much that is possible with citizen developers and even development teams for building and integrating our solutions. And we're going to take one next poll. We want to understand, how does your organization plan to use Teams? And some of the options here, we've got multi-select, basic team collaboration, chats and meetings, voice and conferencing. Maybe it's a collab hub with apps, bots, and tools. Maybe it's even the enterprise hub. But I think it's interesting when you start talking about vision, because maybe you are planning on just using this for chat. When you start talking about Office 365 licensing, Teams is just one of those things that's there. It's very accessible.
That's right, Joel. And what we found is that often people have multiple tools, right? So we're trying to find a way to marry those things together and provide a good proposition for what's in it for me for each one of those particular personas, working styles, working groups, because there are many in the organization today.
Absolutely. I even worked in an organization, they got so burnt out by old versions of Skype and Link that they've been using Cisco and they've been using Zoom and so on. And they're like, we're a bit exhausted from our end users. And it's like, well, you don't want to miss out on what's happening with Teams. So maybe even just starting out using it for collab, and then eventually starting to move some of your chat and communication. And it looks like we've got a variety of different responses here. And I don't know if it was the cheerleading we've done over the last few slides, but it does look like there's a lot of people who are now really looking at it, which is the main answer, which is using it as an enterprise hub for everything above. And it is interesting as well, that basic team collaboration. I think a lot of organizations will probably start from that perspective where it's like, let's focus on the team first, and then later we'll roll out voice and chats and meetings and so on. And I think that's okay. That's one of those things where you talk about roadmap and how you actually plan to roll things out. I'm going to hand this back to you, Ron.
No problem, because a huge part of that roadmap is adoption and change management. And like I said, if you were not able to catch our last webinar about adoption and change management in 365, especially around Teams, please check that out. But let's do a quick round. Let's go around the bend of adoption and change management for a second. So we realize as practitioners, all of us over the phone, and of course myself, Joel, and others, that only about 34% are willing to adopt new technology, right? And a lot of those folks are on this beginning part of this bell curve. And the real magic, as it were, is when we start to bring on not just the innovators and a slither of the early adopters, but once we start getting into the early majority and late majority and even dragging across some of the laggers across a finish line, that's really when we start to get some success. And a proper adoption and change management strategy with champions, practitioners, and communities and others really become pivotal building blocks to your success. And I think you guys may have seen this before, but often we try to go to more of a Spark mentality where we select the right areas to, let's just say, attack, or at the very least to engage with. We look for business units with problems. We talk to folks that know that there's a better way to work, or maybe even are looking for savings and to optimize those ways of working. And from there, we have the what. How are we going to save our time and our efforts and make our people happier and more productive? Next, of course, we move to igniting that. And we start looking at the how via our campaigns to ignite the audience and make sure that we get the right amount of relevance of the platform to those who need it the most. And of course, then we start to get activity on top of activity via campaigns and the proper marketing techniques, and of course, some of our grassroots efforts as well, pushing from the bottom to where we get the user enablement and engagement that we're really looking for. Because it's one thing to adopt something new, which means we've moved your cheese, now come over here and consume it. It's something else when we start engaging. I compare it to when I buy my cat a toy, right? I could buy them a toy just fine, and they may play with it. That's adoption, right? But when they start playing with the box without me engaging whatsoever, and sometimes they prefer the box over the toy, that's engagement. That's when you know you really have something. And just to double down this concept, I know Joel was talking earlier about, when we start to just turn it on, that's great. And when you look at this diagram, that's exactly what it says, is that when you look at your value and ROI on the y-axis, and of course your time and difficulty, this just kind of helps to show where you should be spending your time, because through deployment and activation, you can see a little slither of value starting to pop up. And the fact of the matter is that no one's going to get promoted by having this very small amount of value to the organization. You really want to push it to the right side from a value perspective and start to move in via your awareness campaigns, enabling your users, and of course driving proficiency. Because once you start to learn what the platform does, and sometimes more importantly what it doesn't do, then you can close the gaps and really make it a cohesive experience for your users. Because we talked about context switching and some of those other difficulties that we may have from an overall perspective as an end user at any given point in time. The only way to really reduce some of that and simplify the experience for users, which is really the outcome of a lot of this, is to make sure that, one, we know how people work, two, we know how we can make them more efficient, and three, we give them the ideas and the tools to make everything better. And as you can tell from a often achieved, seldom achieved, and rarely achieved, that proficiency piece is kind of untilled ground to a certain extent. But let's go to, I think this is going to be our last poll, and that is around adoption and change management. So where are you in your adoption of Microsoft Teams? The first option is that we just haven't started yet. Next, we're just evaluating. Second, we've gotten started. Third, we need help with adoption and change management, which is what we often find as far as, Teams is kind of a new frontier, and it's not just a matter of just governance or just people or just change. It's a combination of all those things. And of course, we have champions, we have training programs, we have our comms together, and we're really starting to rock and roll. We've received 14 responses so far. It sounds like very few of us haven't started yet, but we're all kind of in the mix between having started and, of course, having our programs well thought out and fleshed out. Let's visualize.
Yeah, and I would say as well, Ron, I think a lot of people, this idea of an adoption program is not as tangible. It's something that they haven't seen as much as Teams. It seems like most of what you're doing in a Teams deployment is adoption, and I think that's new for a lot of IT teams. Is like they think of it more as, oh, we need a training program or we need a communication program, but there's other parts of the business that often handle training and communication. You've got your comms team or you've got your training team, but what's really unique about Teams is you really need a mix of people who actually understand the technology and people who understand change management and organizational change management and understand kind of this digital transformation type of area. And a lot of organizations just aren't set up for it. And that's often why Microsoft is investing huge in this area and actually helping partners to be able to deliver these things. And I think it's important for organizations to understand that.
That's right. You hit the nail on the head, Joel. It's all about your people, right? Whether you're just rolling out, basic collaboration, chats and meetings just as a communication standard, we just want to not necessarily rip and replace, but we want a replacement for Skype because it's going out of service or whatever. That's one approach. But the way you really get value and derive some of the outcomes you're really looking for is by looking at your people. Whether you're looking at an office worker, a structured worker, which is more of like your first-line worker scenarios, your light and mobile folks who are either on job sites or highly mobile. All those people have different use cases and different things that they have to get done on a daily basis. And while we can centralize all those processes in teams, and we'll talk about how we get there in a second, but this is the starting point for really getting the adoption engagement that we're looking for. It's not just about pushing emails across the organization. We've been conducting training classes because that one-on-one approach is great, and it really gets into how do people need to learn, one, and two, what's going to benefit people the most in their day. Because being able to chat with colleagues is one thing, but being able to save 1, 2, even 3 hours by reducing the pain of mundane processes, that helps as well. And that's where the beauty of Teams comes in. Because it's a cloud platform. You can just turn it on, like Joel said, and you can govern it properly. But if you don't have the proper awareness as far as what the platform can do, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And of course, if you're not starting to bend things towards how people work, and this is different per organization, then you really are not getting the full value of what Teams has to offer. Let's look at that a little bit differently. So let's take our change management concepts of awareness, enablement, and proficiency, and really look at those as more of a top-down approach, right? Because you're creating awareness across your entire enterprise and enabling people, and usually that leads to a few different outcomes, the first of which, of course, is having a good UC platform. That's great. But really not getting to the point of tailoring ourselves to particular painful business processes or enabling your collaborators, whether they may be based on functional areas, departments, business units, partners, or maybe even smaller teams. You really want to get to their particular problems and also evangelize the problems that you are solving. So not only is it a matter of I know about teams, but also I know how other business units and other peers are using the platform so that I can derive some transformation and operational efficiency. Because as you can see, once you combine the top-down approach I talked about earlier all the way down to your change champions and whatnot, and combine it with a bottom-up approach of looking at your collaborators and how I conduct business on a regular basis, that's when you start to reach digital transformation in the middle. And if you start along those lines, that means that, one, you get the standard features out there to make all of your successes more approachable via collaboration, chats and meetings, enterprise voice, and like I said, that unified communication platform for everyone. But let's think past that to number 2 over here. Let's start driving towards operational efficiencies. Let's look at some of the time sucks of our day and some of the things that can easily be automated via the Power Platform, or maybe even integrated with other apps and other services that can help to bring things together, reduce that context switching that we talked about, and simplifying the user experience, and also reducing our signal-to-noise ratio and making sure that from a signal-to-noise scenario that we get the information that we need in a timely basis, which is really key to being successful. And with that, let's look at the 3 different benefits that we're going to go into. So when it comes to operational efficiency, we'll go into tools and applications and how teams can help there. We'll talk about our templates and processes and how we can start building on the platform, and even by extending it, creating a better experience and really answering the what's in it for me factor for all of your employees. So Joel, let's talk about teamwork tools and applications.
Yeah, and I don't mind picking this up for you, Ron. So we talked about Teams. It's really a platform, and I want to kind of just help you understand some of the layers here. First layer is really the integration that you get with all of these Office 365 productivity applications, but also third-party applications that are built right into the platform. So as an example, digital signatures and Trello and Wrike, all these tools that you're using every day for your projects and tasks and so on. And then there's this layer of what you as a citizen developer can use, these like Power Apps for like building applications, Power BI for dashboards, Power Automate, which is basically for your flows and robotic RPA type solutions where you can record and replay. Some really powerful solutions there. There's a huge community around these tools. But even the Power Virtual Agents, which is basically your ability to kind of have leveraging AI for chat. And then this next layer here is really the unseen layer where essentially these are the things where you can actually integrate with line of business and departmental tools, leveraging employee data and so on. And you can see just how rich this platform can be with these multiple layers where whether it's internal development who's building the solutions or whether it's departmental solutions and so on, or even working with a partner like Perficient. Now, there are hundreds out there, and I'm not talking about going and finding new tools. A lot of it's understanding what are your users using today? What is the persona of a team? Your average user actually uses 50 applications. Well, what are those 50 applications? How many of them are actually amongst the hundreds that Microsoft already supports? And what can you use in terms of low-hanging fruit to actually start realizing some of those productivity gains?
Exactly, and believe it or not, that can be one of your hardest governance pieces, to your point, Joel, is figuring out what are going to be your approved apps versus the one-offs that different business units need. Because once you start enabling people, it really starts to become widespread.
Yeah, in fact, the first thing here is actually understanding what do you want to enable. So you may actually start off supporting a limited number that are the ones that are approved. And as you gain confidence with those apps and adding in enterprise apps, it's basically really getting your arms around what are your app permission policies and enabling that functionality and actually helping teams take advantage of it. Now, Microsoft has actually shortcut this a little bit. They've actually built some app templates, and these are really, really powerful. And I'm going to kind of fly over these, but I want you to be aware just of, as an example, on that available, drop the bulleted list there. There's some HR support things. There's FAQs, icebreakers, where you can basically introduce people, leveraging a bot. There's some kind of ability to add custom stickers, and Microsoft's continuing to add additional capabilities in here. So we're going to look at a couple of these just high level. There's an HR support app template, very rich functionality that actually takes advantage of both chat and takes advantage of the Q&A maker. It integrates with customer service like a support tab. And I'm going to show you a couple screenshots. Here's kind of how it looks like on the mobile interface as well as in the Teams UI. And it integrates right into the application. So basically, leave requests that go to a manager where they can then approve that and automatically integrate with the leave and approval. And here's what it looks like on the back end where you're looking at administrator who can, from a ticket or support perspective, you can kind of say, here's active tickets, here's resolved tickets. And so it's an application built right inside the application. Pretty powerful. And this is a more zoomed in version of the one where you can see integrating with one of those chat conversation where it's actually then putting them in touch with a real human. So it's basically allowing the user to take advantage of these really smart messages where they can click to schedule or click to cancel the chat and so on. And here's a quick example of like what the dashboard looks like on the back end, integrated with the Power BI, being able to see what's happening, and just kind of it's super powerful, that ability to kind of see, well, what's happening and who's doing what, and let me see a quick view of the statistics, and it's just a little tab to be able to quickly get on top of what's happening in the organization. And next section, we're talking about extensibility. And so when you talk about developing or being able to build your solutions inside of Teams, you can actually reach the users where they are, where they live, in their chats, in their channels, in notifications, and in the workspaces themselves. And there's a variety of things here. What I would suggest is that we're actually going to do another webinar in the next couple of months where we actually dive into Teams as a developer platform. And we'll give you some more examples of these and other ways to kind of look at Teams as a development platform. But this idea of tabs and bots and feeds, some super powerful stuff. I'm going to hand this back to Ron.
Sure thing. No, and from our experience, we've really been able to get notes from the field from Microsoft as a premier partner. And we really value that expertise that we bring to the table, whether it's taking these templates and building solutions from them, because these are starting points. So when it comes down to use cases such as alerting a data center, or helping with care teams, or whatever the use case may be, there's a lot to be had there and some very good starting points. And of course, we offer free workshops to envision what your enterprise could look like with a digital hub such as Microsoft Teams at the center, bringing together your intranet and other areas that really are meaningful to your users in order to create a comprehensive experience for people that's not just communication, not just productivity, and not just the other assets of it, but bringing it all together in a meaningful way. And of course, nothing would make any sense without a little bit of promotion around, deployment sizing, those size of the opportunity. There's always opportunities for financing, whether it's investments from us or Microsoft, or just getting pilots off the ground to prove out some value in order to really drive the message home. Because nothing really communicates the effort like showing people what it does and what the possibilities are. Like I said, plenty of services, whether you're getting started, trying to recognize value like I talked about via proof of value, or looking to launch and for your post-launch activities, making sure that we're addressing everything from the technical, whether you're moving from Skype to Teams or looking to do a PBX assessment or a networking assessment across these things, to enhancing collaboration, running pilots, driving enablement, and of course all the quick starts that we have listed here, all the way down to governance automation, some of the more advanced features around bots and migrations to Teams and whatnot. We have you covered. Like we talked about earlier, we reviewed a lot of resources today, and this slide, it will walk you through all of those as a centralized area for all of the links and resources that we mentioned today. So when you get this copy of the presentation, feel free to look through a lot of these, because a lot of them are available via the community and are really great starting points for everything you're looking to do. Also keep in mind that we have blogs to help you out on Perficient.com, and a few resources there for driving end user engagement, adoption change management, and a lot of other areas. So this is always one of my favorite areas of a webinar, which of course is our Q&A. And we have a couple of questions here. Joel, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it. So
Awesome.
Go ahead and use your Q&A panel, and let's. I'd love to hear from you. I do see a couple of questions are already in here, and but I definitely want to encourage those of you who've been waiting for the Q&A portion to do this. And I do want to pick one of these questions that I really like. There's where does the intranet fit into this concept? Our digital workplace vision is based on the intranet, not Teams. And what I love about this question, I'm going to take this, and I want you to hear your thoughts on this one, Ron, because I think this is super applicable. I think that for the last how many years, I've been working on intranets for more than 20 years. I'm getting old. But intranets have always been kind of the way that the organization can communicate to the employee, and whether that's through various portals and interfaces, like HR has their portal, or you kind of have these hubs. Even in SharePoint, it's like all these different hubs, and then you have this kind of the the top level organizational thing, and obviously the SharePoint team has got built all the really cool news stuff, with targeting and all these enhancements. And then you bring Teams into this. How do all these things fit in? And I want to kind of say that I've had an epiphany this past year as I've been approaching Teams and seeing, well, this productivity tool that is Teams and this bigger, broader vision for Teams as a single hub. Well, how does the intranet fit into that? Well, let me tell you, I believe that it's just as that vision can be realized. We should be pulling the news from the intranet into Teams. We should be leveraging Teams as a communication collaboration platform. And just like those of you who went to Ignite, you saw that there's the new Yammer. Well, new Yammer, the new interfaces they're building are going to snap right into Teams. And I think that as we start talking about intranets and tools and solutions and even the traditional things you would do with an intranet, our ability as an intranet team or a team that cares about communication and collaboration, we should really be looking at what are the best ways and best interfaces for our users. And what's great is how Teams and SharePoint integrate so that you've actually got hubs, and how do we bring those hubs into Teams experiences with channels. Well, there's one of the big things that I think a lot of people have missed is that there are these capabilities around org-wide groups. So we have the ability to bring these things in. And very quickly people will say, oh, well, Teams doesn't support, so many thousands of people in a single channel. And I think that's important to understand, and hence why new Yammer is going to be so important when we start doing kind of bigger, broader communications that are blasted out to the 50,000 or 100,000 or the super large, much larger organizations. But and I could go on, but I just want to kind of simplify it that I think that it is an integrated solution. Teams and SharePoint, not SharePoint or Teams. It's Teams and SharePoint. There's really a marriage of these tools.
Exactly, and there's a couple different ways to approach it, right? There's building your intranet as an app to insert into Teams, just like when you look at that tab interface on the left side where you see calls and chats and activity, building it into that as its own separate channel, so to speak, of information and a different place to go. That's one way to address this very tactically. There's a lot more to it naturally. But then also, your intranet can be broken apart into the relevant items for a particular group. Because when you look at Teams, those are all collaborators looking to accomplish something. And there may be information from the intranet that you can then insert, just like they're talking about for Yammer and bringing in some of those wider bullhorn conversations into dedicated silos. It's that kind of thing where you can still interact with the intranet, interact with some of those other avenues, but have it in a more focused and confined area, which really helps to narrow the conversation and, of course, remove some of that noise.
And next question, does Perficient have consultants who do Power Apps as well as Teams?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's been one of our bread and butter things since the launch of the Power Platform. We're part of the BizApps program with Microsoft, which has allowed us to get insights into not only how the Power Platform has been changing over the years, but also how to deliver that at scale for customers. And we have some in retail, automotive manufacturers, and a whole host of clients that are using Power Apps to promote both teams and, of course, just individual employee mobility to solve problems around the organization. That's a huge area for us as we start plugging and playing things into Teams from their siloed points now of only going to Power Apps for this or only going to SharePoint for that. Teams is really becoming that connective tissue, and we've had a lot of great experiences bringing those savings to clients.
That's really cool. Yeah, I've been with Perficient for about 6 months, and I've noticed that the Perficient teams are really organized around the different clouds that Microsoft has. But what's great as well is just how cohesive those clouds can be in terms of integrated solutions that pull in Azure as well as, say, Teams and the Office 365 cloud, and even the dynamics with the CRM and so on. And that these things really do, that you want somebody who actually understands all three of Microsoft's clouds, as well as understands the other SaaS apps that are out there. Because when you're looking at the vision of Teams, these solutions, really there's a plethora of different apps and solutions you really need to be able to bring together with the Power Platform, with Teams, and then all the different things that actually relate to the line of business integration and how you bring that in. So it's more critical than ever, I think, that you need people who actually have broad capabilities and not just boutique shops that understand the tool to a certain depth in one tool. These ones, you do want people who understand your industry as you start to tackle much bigger, broader issues.
Exactly.
The next question here, and it looks like we probably have time for one or two more questions if anybody has any more, but what should I be building solutions in team with? And I think this does kind of lend itself closer to what we'll be doing in that development webinar for Teams. But when I was doing some research, I noticed just these app templates that we were talking about, super powerful, lots of good samples, and I would highly encourage any developers that are on, or even people who are architects who are trying to understand, hey man, you just opened up my world on Teams. Well, what's really cool is there's actually a number of JavaScript samples, Node samples, .NET samples. If you've built stuff in React, or there's actually a lot of good samples that are actually out there that Microsoft is just sharing broadly. The webhooks examples, the stuff that they built around this HR solution, support. I would highly encourage people who don't mind pulling up their sleeves and digging in. You can actually see what some good examples actually look like in terms of chat interfaces and the message cards and action cards and so on that are actually here.
Exactly, and a good starting point is the Power Platform, and of course building reusable web parts in both SharePoint and of course moving them over to Teams. That's a very good way to get your toes wet and get started.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time to actually promote. We did an event in Irvine that was actually highly successful. A lot of excitement, and we want to actually bring this across the nation. We have already selected dates and been working with Microsoft on a couple of upcoming events. We've got one in Denver on January 16th. We've got one in Chicago on January 22nd. And we've even got one we've been organizing with the community up in Boston that's going to be called New England Teams Thursday, that's planned for when the snow thaws a little bit in April 2nd. And we have other cities to be announced, but we already know we definitely want to do one in Atlanta.
Exactly.
And
so stay tuned
we have some
URL.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, stay tuned to the URL. I mean, I know there are some other webinars you're talking about, so let's get to the webinars and thank everyone for their time. Go ahead, Bill.
Absolutely. So the webinars we have as well, I mentioned that we definitely want to do a dev one. We haven't put a date to that yet, but I'm thinking it'll probably be in early February. And there is one that we have planned for January called Skype to Teams migration. And we've actually got an infographic that you notice that one with the iceberg. I've been working with a designer on building out this really cool infographic that actually helps simplify the Skype to Teams migration and some of the coexistence modes. But yeah, definitely, and as well, Project Cortex is something it's been yeah, that's one of the things that really blows you away when you start talking about bringing all this technology together. I think it's Project Cortex. If you haven't looked at that, highly encourage you to check that out, and we will be doing kind of an intro webinar on that. So definitely check things
and with
out.
that, Angie, you want to take us out?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks guys. Ron, Joel, thank you very much for the presentation. To all of our participants, we'd like to thank you for joining today's webinar. As we previously indicated, you will receive a recording of today's presentation along with the slides in the next few business days. And if you have any questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out to Ron or Joel. And you can also check out more of their events on Perficient.com. Thanks again for joining, and everyone have a great day.